It's late at night. I just finished watching tonight's episode of Vikings, and wow, um, there were a few twists in this one, with the major one coming at the end of the episode. And while this was a very good episode overall, really the only minor gripe I have is that some of the events that happened, I think could have been set up better than they were, because some of the things that happened did seem kind of random and out of nowhere. But basically, the plot of the episode is that King Horik comes back to Ragnar's village. Ragnar having taken back his village from Jarl Borg in the previous episode. Now King Horik, as we were told the last episode, again, I wish we had seen it, but we were told the last episode that King Egbert had basically ambushed King Horik's forces and completely wiped them out. Only Horik and his son were able to escape. So he's basically come crawling back to Ragnar. They've basically been totally defeated because Ragnar bailed out to go take back his village, and King Horik just lost because he's an idiot. Which, in retrospect, makes me think that Donal Logue, the guy who plays him, would make a pretty good Harvey Bullock in the new Gotham TV show. But I digress. So he comes crawling back to Ragnar, and he actually proposes. King Horik proposes this. He says, we should probably go to Jarl Borg, because he will be demoralized. He will be wanting to recover from this. He will be wanting to recover from the defeat, and basically extending an olive branch to renew our alliance would not only win his loyalty, but it would renew our own forces, because we don't exactly have a lot of guys. We don't have sufficient men to go on another raid. Ragnar agrees to this, and Jarl Borg comes to Ragnar's village for a parley. So that plot point takes up that plot line takes up most of the episode, while subplots include Bjorn actually further assimilating into Viking life by pursuing this woman who it turns out is a dancer. That's probably the least interesting plot, to be honest. And we also get a subplot with Lagatha coming back to a less than enthusiastic reunion with her new husband, who we have basically learned from the first episode that he was on screen that he was an abusive husband. So here we finally see that come to fruition, albeit somewhat clunkily. And the final big subplot here is that basically we still follow the priest Athelstan. I think that's how you say his name. We still follow him, having been left behind in England, basically trying to re-educate himself in the ways of the Christians. And King Egbert making a pretty interesting move. Basically extends a hand in friendship, so to speak, by not only seeking his counsel on several issues, but saying that you and I are kindred spirits. We see beyond the perspective of a lot of other men here. So he basically puts him in charge of his collection of Roman artifacts and Roman scrolls. So if I'm rating on on plot lines that hooked me, that was probably the one I would choose. Although, to be fair, I did not see when it was revealed what finally happens between Ragnar, Jarlborg, and King Horik. I have to admit, I did not see that coming. So that one does pick up, and like I said, the least interesting one is the one involving Bjorn. Not because the acting is bad. The acting is still very good all around. Travis Fimmel doesn't get quite as much to do this time around. I mean, he's still very stoic. You can tell that he's kind of contemplating what's the best thing to do. He seems to be taking his advisor's advice into consideration. But in reality, the thing I like about Ragnar, the thing I've always liked about Ragnar, is that he, despite what anyone says, if he thinks he can win in a seemingly unwinnable scenario, then he will go for that unwinnable scenario. So yeah, he basically makes a decision that at this point seems pretty rash, and kind of impulsive. I think when I first saw what he was doing, I was like, okay, you have just spent this entire episode talking and listening to how if you Vikings don't band together, then you will eventually lose everything. So you have more to gain by working together than you do by constantly being dragged down by these feuds. And it's not like Ragnar does not have a reason to be angry with Jarl Borg. He does. But from a strategic standpoint, it doesn't really seem like the smartest thing to do. Now again, this brings me to one of those things where I wish it had been set up a bit more. I'm not saying give away the twist, but I am saying maybe place a little bit, maybe give a bit more of a hint of Ragnar's doubts and what he feels towards Jarl Borg. And I understand what they were going for. They were trying to keep it a mystery. But I don't know, some indication would have been nice, so it didn't really seem so like I said, out of nowhere. Same with Lagertha and what she ultimately does in her position to her husband. Now, from the beginning, I have never understood why Lagertha has shacked herself up with this guy. I have never understood it. I've always found this guy to be a very boring character on the show, and I think they know that too because they barely give him any screen time. But he resorts to a very cowardly and despicable method to assert his authority over his wife, because we've already seen her humble him in a way when he tried to force himself on her earlier. So he resorts to a very cheap tactic to remind her that he's still in charge. It doesn't work. And when she finally does take action, I was thinking to myself, about time. Because we have always known that she is fully capable of killing this guy. And I think that's what they were going for in not quite setting it up. Because spoilers, she ultimately kills her husband. I don't know how much of a spoiler that is, considering how crappy he's been and how they haven't really done much to give him any kind of legitimate motivation other than lust. But in not drawing any kind of negative response from his followers, because when she stabs him in the head, he's bleeding out onto the floor, and a person who we can assume is the captain of the guard or some soldier of some authority. He raises the sword toward Lagertha and then swings it down and beheads her husband. So he basically finishes the job, and basically what this implies is that she's in charge now. Or at least I'm pretty sure that's what this implies. Now, if we had gotten some indication of shifting loyalty in these people, maybe I would have bought it a bit more. But I don't think the moment feels as genuine as it would have if they would have included a few scenes where Lagatha is winning respect amongst the men. Basically, all we have to go on, at least in that sense, is her leading them into battle, supposedly without his permission. Now, I assume that we're meant to put the pieces together because I was kind of picking apart this plot hole as it was unfolding on screen. He said that she left without his permission to go help Ragnar, but I was asking, okay, how did she persuade all those guys to come with her? And I guess we're meant to assume that she won them over, and that's also the reason why her husband is ultimately beheaded. But again, a more concrete explanation would have been nice instead of having to piece together past events in the middle of a line of dialogue. I would have liked to have seen some kind of motivating factor for betraying their king or betraying their lord. But the good thing is we don't have to deal with this very boring character anymore, and it'll be interesting to see where Lagatha goes from here. And the pacing in this episode was very good. Very nearly perfect. Because it never really felt like one storyline was getting that much more attention than the other. And the episode didn't feel fragmented. It moved along at a very smooth pace. And I think that's what the creators of this show are learning as they go along. Is how to really balance all of these characters, a la Game of Thrones. I read something online, or I read a headline somewhere where it says something along the lines of, "Is Vikings the next Game of Thrones? Is the History Channel trying to make it the next Game of Thrones?" Certain aspects of it, I think are better than Game of Thrones, and certain aspects about it, I think, are done better in Game of Thrones. Now, if you ask me which I prefer, I don't know, because honestly, I think it's still pretty early in the game for Vikings to really be deciding against Game of Thrones, which is about to start its 4th season this weekend, if I'm not mistaken. But in terms of this episode, I really liked the building relationship between scholars, as it were, between the priest and King Egbert. Because I liked, it felt genuine, it felt very believable, and it really strengthened King Egbert's character. Now, as for the priest, we did get a pretty cool scene in terms of just the imagery, where as he is trying to write and trying to get these old skills back, he has another one of those hallucinations, and he actually starts bleeding from where he was pierced in multiple spots during the crucifixion. Like he had the crown of thorns on, so he starts bleeding from several spots on his head, and he starts bleeding from the middle of his hands. It's not real. It's, like I said, it's a hallucination, but just a really cool little visual to get across that, yeah, he's still having conflicted feelings about reconverting to Christianity, and so on and so forth. But that's not the main focus of his this time around. The main focus is building this friendship with King Egbert. Now, it's a friendship that he'll have to tread lightly on, because Egbert flat out said, if you reveal our conversations to anyone, conversations about paganism and how I tolerate it to an extent, then I will let them crucify you. I will deny everything and let them crucify you. But seeing Egbert view paganism as as this very as a staple of this very very accomplished culture, because they bring up the Roman Empire in this movie, and in this episode, and he basically says the Roman Empire conquered lands all over. I mean, look at all they accomplished, and they were pagans. Now, what lesson can we learn from that? So I really like that they're not going for the stereotypical, oh, Christianity is good, all other religions are bad, because that kind of one-dimensional prejudice can make for a pretty dull character. It's the problem, or it's similar to the problem they had with Lagatha's husband, and why I'm glad he's gone. But it'll be interesting to see where the friendship between Athelstan and King Egbert goes from here. Now, as for the final twist, I'm not going to give it away, but it seems like a pretty dark twist for Ragnar, who's ordinarily painted very honorably in comparison to all of his peers. Now, to say that Jarl Borg didn't deserve it would be a lie, because look at how much of a jerk he's been portrayed as in the last few episodes, and in this episode he's portrayed as having a few screws loose in the head. He talks to the skull of his first wife, and he doesn't just talk to it. He's like, oh, what do you think, my love? I'm like, okay, I think this guy does not get out too much. And he talks to this skull in front of his current wife. So I don't exactly know how right this guy is in the head. I'm guessing not that much. But the fact that Ragnar kept him alive and slaughtered the rest of his men, spoilers, by the way, the fact that Ragnar kept him alive says something strategically, but about Ragnar, because maybe he wants to use him as a prisoner of war. Maybe Jarl Borg left some forces behind in his homeland, and Ragnar wants to blackmail them into helping them. I don't know. Maybe I'm just speculating. But it seemed like a very odd move to keep Jarl Borg alive and kill all of his men. Now, what I thought was going to happen was they keep the men alive, and then do a public execution of Jarl Borg as kind of this rite of passage, this passing of leadership, as it were. Like, I have killed your leader, and you will follow me now. And they would be like, okay. But I don't know. A lot of plot lines in this episode really moved forward a lot. I didn't see some of them coming, and as always, it'll be interesting to see what happens next. So until next, or not until next week, until tomorrow, feel free to leave comments, and I will talk more to the camera at another time.